She thought it would be a simple act of kindness. But one conversation over coffee turns into something much deeper, uncovering a hidden connection to her past and sparking whispers all over town. Just when her guarded heart begins to open, her young daughter blurts out a shocking line in front of the entire cafe, setting off gossip, scandal, and a chain of events that could either heal their lives or shatter them forever. As the pressure mounts and the truth gets twisted for the world to see, one question remains. Is this the start of a second chance, or the moment everything falls apart? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The neon open sign cast a soft red glow through the rain-streaked windows of Henderson's Diner. Clara's fingers worked methodically over the worn tabletop, her cleaning cloth catching every crumb and coffee stain. The familiar motion helped calm her racing thoughts after another long day of serving, cooking, and keeping the books balanced. "Mom, look what I drew." Emily's voice rang out from her usual spot in the corner booth. She held up her paper, beaming with pride. "It's our diner, but with a rocket on top." Clara smiled, warmth filling her chest despite her exhaustion. "That's creative, sweetie, though I think the health department might have something to say about rocket fuel near the kitchen." Emily giggled, already reaching for another crayon. "Maybe we could just serve astronaut ice cream instead." Thunder rumbled outside as Clara moved to the next table. The brass bell above the door had finally stopped its constant jingling now that the dinner rush was over. Only old Mr. Peterson remained, nursing his final cup of decaf by the window. The quiet was a welcome relief after hours of clattering plates and overlapping conversations. As she wiped down a recently vacated booth, something caught her eye. A phone lay abandoned on the seat, its sleek black case looking startlingly expensive against the worn red vinyl. Clara picked it up carefully, noting how it felt different from her own basic model. The screen was larger, the edges smooth and pristine. "Should we put it in the lost and found box?" Emily asked, wandering over to peer at the device. Her paper rocket drawing was clutched in one hand. Clara turned the phone over in her hands. The lost and found box was really just a shoebox under the counter, currently home to 3 mismatched gloves and a pair of reading glasses. Something about this phone felt different, too valuable to toss in with the other forgotten items. "Just a quick look to see who it belongs to," Clara murmured, mostly to herself. She pressed the power button, and the screen lit up with a simple lock screen. Her breath caught as she read the name displayed there. Ethan Caldwell. The name tugged at her memory. Whispered conversations between customers over coffee. A massive house on the cliff overlooking the beach that had sat empty for years until a few months ago. A mysterious tech billionaire who'd walked away from his company to live a quieter life. "Oh my gosh!" Emily bounced on her toes, suddenly very interested. "That's the guy who bought the old Miller place. Sarah in my class says he has a robot butler and a helicopter pad on his roof." Clara shook her head, amused by her daughter's excitement. "I doubt that, honey. Though he certainly could afford both." She wrapped the phone carefully in a clean napkin, her decision made. "Mr. Peterson, we're closing up a bit early tonight, if you don't mind." The elderly man nodded, leaving his usual generous tip as he shuffled out into the rain. Clara helped Emily gather her art supplies and homework into her backpack, then did a final check of the kitchen. The whole time, she was acutely aware of the phone tucked safely in her apron pocket. "Are we really going to take it to his house?" Emily asked as Clara locked up the front door. "Can I come? Maybe he'll let me see the robot butler." "Tomorrow morning, sweetheart. It's too late now." Clara pulled up her umbrella, sheltering them both as they hurried through the rain to their car. "And no robot butler, remember?" The phone felt heavy in her pocket as she drove them home through the quiet streets of Seabreeze. Part of her wondered if she was being foolish, if she should have just left it in the lost and found like any other item. But something, perhaps the same instinct that had helped her keep the diner running all these years, told her this was the right choice. Rain drummed steadily on the roof of their small house as Clara tucked Emily into bed later that night. After reading 2 chapters of their current book and answering several more questions about theoretical robot butlers, she finally had a moment to herself. Sitting at the kitchen table, Clara carefully unwrapped the phone from its napkin covering. The screen had gone dark, but another quick press of the button revealed Ethan Caldwell's name again. She tried to imagine the man behind the name, someone important enough to have his own Wikipedia page, yet who chose to eat quietly in her modest diner. Thunder crashed outside, making her jump. Clara wrapped the phone back in its napkin and set it by her keys. In the morning, she would drive up to that big house on the cliff and return it. Simple as that. Just another small-town interaction, even if one party happened to be a billionaire. Still, as she got ready for bed, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in her carefully ordered world. Like the first drop of rain before a storm, small but promising change. She stepped out onto her tiny back porch, listening to the rain and watching distant lightning illuminate the clouds over the ocean. The phone was just a phone, she told herself. Tomorrow she would return it, and everything would go back to normal. Back to the comfortable routine she'd built for herself and Emily. But as another flash of lightning briefly turned night to day, Clara couldn't help but wonder if normal was all she really wanted anymore. Author's note. This covers the opening scene through Clara finding and deciding to return the phone, ending with her contemplating this decision on a rainy night, as requested. The scene maintains focus on establishing Clara's character, her relationship with Emily, and the setup for the inciting incident of finding Ethan's phone. Clara's old Honda Civic rattled slightly as she pulled into the circular driveway of the Cliffside Inn. The morning sun glinted off the building's floor-to-ceiling windows, making her squint. Luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, and what she was pretty sure was a Bentley lined the carefully manicured entrance. She'd already dropped Emily off at school, watching her daughter bounce up the steps with her oversized backpack. Now, sitting in her car between a gleaming Range Rover and some sort of sports car, Clara felt decidedly out of place. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, tucking a stray strand of honey-brown hair behind her ear and wishing she'd worn something nicer than her practical blue sweater and jeans. "Come on, Clara," she muttered to herself. "It's just returning a phone. 2 minutes, tops." The phone sat in her purse, still wrapped in the clean diner napkin from last night. She took a deep breath, grabbed her bag, and stepped out of the car. The inn's automatic glass doors whispered open, welcoming her into a lobby that practically sparkled. The marble floor reflected the crystal chandelier overhead, and the furniture looked too expensive to actually sit on. Clara's sensible boots clicked against the floor as she approached the front desk, each step echoing in the cavernous space. A perfectly polished receptionist looked up, her practiced smile faltering just slightly as she took in Clara's modest appearance. "Good morning. How may I assist you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Caldwell," Clara said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I found his phone at my diner last night." The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "I see. And your name is?" "Clara Henderson, from Henderson's Diner on Bay Street." "One moment, please." The receptionist picked up her phone, speaking in low tones while Clara tried not to fidget. Minutes stretched by. Clara checked her watch, thinking about the morning prep work waiting for her at the diner. Just as she was considering leaving the phone with the receptionist, footsteps echoed from the hallway to her left. "Mrs. Henderson?" Clara turned to find a man walking toward her, dressed in jeans and a simple gray sweater that probably cost more than her monthly utilities. Ethan Caldwell looked younger than she'd expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and slight crow's feet that suggested he smiled often. There was none of the corporate stiffness she'd anticipated from a tech billionaire. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, reaching into her purse, "I found this at the diner last night." She held out the napkin-wrapped phone. His face lit up with genuine relief. "I've been looking everywhere for this. I must have left it when I stopped in for pie." He unwrapped the napkin carefully, checking the phone. "The lemon meringue was excellent, by the way." Clara felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thank you. It's my grandmother's recipe." "Well, Mrs. Henderson, you've saved me from having to replace all my contacts and notes." He slipped the phone into his pocket, still smiling. "Please, let me thank you properly." "Would you join me for coffee? The cafe here makes a fantastic cappuccino." Clara blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. She glanced at her watch again. She still had an hour before the morning rush would start at the diner. But coffee? With Ethan Caldwell? The same Ethan Caldwell who'd made headlines when he suddenly stepped down from his tech empire 6 months ago? I wouldn't want to take up your time, she said carefully. I insist. He gestured toward the cafe entrance, where more sunlight streamed through wall-length windows overlooking the ocean. Unless you have somewhere else to be? Clara hesitated. The practical part of her brain told her to politely decline and get back to work. But something in his genuine smile and relaxed demeanor made her pause. When was the last time she'd sat down for coffee with someone who wasn't a supplier or customer? I suppose I have time for 1 cup, she found herself saying. Excellent. Ethan's smile widened, and he led the way toward the cafe. And please, call me Ethan. Mr. Caldwell makes me feel like I'm in a board meeting. As they walked through the elegant space, Clara couldn't help but notice how other guests turned to look at them. She felt painfully aware of her practical clothes and minimal makeup among the well-heeled breakfast crowd. But Ethan seemed completely at ease, nodding to a server who immediately guided them to a quiet corner table with a spectacular view of the coastline. I know this might seem a bit much for a simple thank you, Ethan said as they settled into their chairs. But honest people are rare these days. Most would have just kept the phone or tried to sell it to the tabloids. Clara shook her head. That wouldn't be right. Besides, my daughter Emily would never let me hear the end of it if I didn't do the honest thing. The server appeared with menus, but Ethan waved them away. 2 cappuccinos, please, and, he glanced at Clara, would you like anything to eat? Just coffee is fine, Clara said quickly, not wanting to impose further. As the server disappeared, Clara found herself studying Ethan more closely. The man before her seemed nothing like the stern-faced executive she'd seen in news photos. His shoulders were relaxed, his manner open and friendly. She couldn't quite reconcile this person with the business titan who'd reportedly walked away from a multi-billion-dollar company at the height of its success. So, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, Henderson's Diner. How long have you owned it? The simple question carried no judgment, just genuine interest. Clara glanced at her watch one last time, then decided to let herself relax. After all, it was just coffee. The Cliffside Inn's cafe was nothing like Clara's diner. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers, and the air smelled of expensive coffee and freshly baked pastries. Ethan led her to a quiet corner table beside a window overlooking the ocean. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass, warming the polished wooden surface between them. Please, order anything you'd like, Ethan said, gesturing to the leather-bound menu. His voice was gentle, lacking the commanding tone she'd expected from someone of his status. Clara picked up the menu and nearly choked at the prices. Just a regular coffee is fine. The lemon scones here are amazing, he suggested, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. Best I've had outside of England. When the server arrived, Ethan ordered 2 coffees and a plate of scones to share. Clara noticed how he addressed the server by name and asked about her grandmother's health. It wasn't the artificial politeness she often saw from wealthy customers at her diner. He seemed genuinely interested. So, Ethan said once they were alone, tell me about your diner. I've driven past it several times but haven't stopped in yet. Henderson's, it's nothing fancy. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug the server had placed before her. Just good, honest food. My regulars say it's the best comfort food in town, but they're biased. Those are usually the best places. Ethan broke a scone in half and offered her a piece. How long have you owned it? Almost 11 years now. Clara accepted the scone, its buttery smell making her mouth water. I bought it after my husband. She paused, the familiar ache in her chest returning. After Mark passed. Ethan's expression shifted, a flash of recognition crossing his face. Mark Henderson? Clara sat up straighter. You knew him? I did, actually. We served together briefly. Ethan's voice softened with respect. He was stationed at Camp Pendleton when I was doing my military consulting work. Mark was one of the best communications specialists I ever worked with. Clara felt her throat tighten. He never mentioned working with you. It was classified at the time, but I remember him showing me pictures of his baby girl during lunch breaks." Ethan smiled warmly. He was so proud of her. "Emily, right?" Clara nodded, touching the simple gold wedding band she still wore. "She's 10 now, smart as a whip and twice as determined. Sometimes when she gets that focused look on her face, she looks just like him." "Single parenting must be challenging," Ethan said, his tone free of pity, just understanding. "It can be." Clara took a sip of her coffee, surprised by how easily the words came. "But Emily makes it worth every minute. Even when she's trying to convince me to let her build a robot out of our kitchen appliances." Ethan laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made Clara smile despite herself. "A budding engineer? More like a future mad scientist." Clara found herself relaxing into the conversation. Last month she tried to create an automatic homework doing machine using rubber bands and her father's old calculator. Did it work? "Unless you count shooting rubber bands at the cat as doing homework. Then no." They both chuckled, and Clara realized it had been ages since she'd laughed like this with someone other than Emily. The morning light caught the silver in Ethan's dark hair, and she noticed how his whole face lit up when he smiled, not at all like the stern businessman she'd seen in news photos. "What made you leave the corporate world?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "I realized I had everything society said should make me happy, but I felt empty. One day I was sitting in yet another board meeting, looking at profit projections, and I thought, is this really all there is?" He gestured to the cafe around them. "So I stepped down, bought a house here, and started looking for something more meaningful." "And have you found it?" "I'm getting closer." His eyes met hers with unexpected warmth. "Sometimes the most meaningful things come from unexpected places." Clara felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly looked down at her watch. "Oh, I should really get going. The breakfast rush will be starting soon, and—" "Of course." Ethan stood as she did, that old-fashioned courtesy again. "Thank you for returning my phone, and for the company." Clara gathered her purse, feeling oddly reluctant to leave. For the first time in years, she'd felt truly seen not as Mark's widow, or Emily's mom, or the diner owner, but as herself. "Thank you for the coffee." And the scones were delicious. She had just pushed in her chair when a familiar voice rang out from the cafe doorway. "Mommy." Emily burst through the cafe door, her school backpack bouncing, and her rain jacket dripping puddles onto the polished floor. Her cheeks were flushed from running, and her dark curls had escaped from their neat morning braids. "Mom, I found you!" she beamed, racing toward their table with the boundless energy only a 10-year-old could muster after sprinting through the rain. Clara's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "Emily, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in school. I wanted to surprise you." Emily's eyes darted between her mother and Ethan, curiosity lighting up her face. "Mrs. Patterson had a dentist appointment, so they let us out early. I saw your car outside." The other cafe patrons, mostly well-dressed business people and tourists, glanced up from their laptops and morning papers, some smiling at Emily's enthusiasm, others frowning at the disruption. Clara stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Sweetheart, you can't just walk across town by yourself. I was so worried when—" But Emily wasn't listening. Her attention had fixed entirely on Ethan, who sat watching the scene with an amused smile. She tilted her head, studying him with the direct, unfiltered gaze of childhood. "Are you the man from the phone? The one Mom found last night?" Emily asked, rocking on her heels. Ethan nodded, his expression warm. "That's right. I'm Ethan. Your mom was kind enough to return it to me." Emily's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Without warning, she clasped her hands together and announced in a voice that carried across the entire cafe, "Mommy says you're my daddy." The cafe fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. Clara felt her face burn as every head turned toward their table. Her coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. "Emily!" Clara gasped. I didn't." But Emily, clearly believing she'd done something wonderful, continued enthusiastically. "I heard you talking to Aunt Sarah on the phone last night about meeting him today. And you said he knew Daddy from before, and— Sweetheart, no, Clara interrupted, her voice strained. She grabbed a handful of napkins, dabbing frantically at the spilled coffee. That's not what Mr. Caldwell just— Ethan sat perfectly still, his expression caught between bewilderment and something else Clara couldn't quite read. His eyes met hers across the table, questioning. You have really nice eyes, Emily informed him matter-of-factly. Just like in the picture Mom keeps in her drawer. The one with all the soldiers? Clara wanted to sink through the floor. Emily, honey, Mr. Caldwell served with Daddy, but he's not. But wouldn't it be amazing if he was? Emily bounced on her toes, warming to her theme. He could come to my science fair next week. I'm building a solar-powered water filter, and Tommy Watson's dad is helping him with his project, and I thought maybe— An elderly couple at the next table exchanged knowing looks. The whispers had started. Clara could feel them spreading through the cafe like ripples in a pond. And you could come to our house for dinner, Emily continued, oblivious to her mother's distress. We make pizza on Fridays, and Mom lets me put whatever toppings I want, even pineapple, which she says is weird, but I think— Emily. Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. She grabbed her purse with trembling hands. We need to go. Now. But Mom? Now, please. Clara couldn't bring herself to look at Ethan. I am so sorry about this, Mr. Caldwell. She misunderstood. I would never— Clara, Ethan started to say, rising from his chair. His voice was gentle, but she couldn't bear to hear whatever came next. Thank you for the coffee, she managed, already steering Emily toward the door. Emily, say goodbye to Mr. Caldwell. Bye, Ethan, Emily called cheerfully, still not grasping the magnitude of what she'd done. Maybe next time you can tell me more stories about when you knew my dad. Mom doesn't talk about him much, but I bet you— Emily, please. Clara's voice cracked slightly as she pushed open the heavy glass door, the rain still falling steadily outside. She heard footsteps behind them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Ethan had followed them to the curb, his expression thoughtful as he watched them prepare to brave the rain. Clara, wait, he called softly. You don't have to. But Clara was already hustling Emily toward their car, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. The last thing she saw in her rearview mirror was Ethan standing in the rain, watching them drive away. Clara sat at her kitchen table, staring at the now cold cup of chamomile tea she'd made to calm her nerves. The house was quiet except for the steady patter of rain against the windows and the distant hum of the dishwasher. Her phone buzzed against the wooden table, making her jump. Linda's name flashed across the screen with a text that made her stomach drop. Have you seen what they're saying on the Seabreeze community page? Someone posted about Emily's daddy comment at the cafe. It's spreading like wildfire. Clara's hands shook as she opened the local Facebook group. Sure enough, there it was, a post from someone who'd been at the cafe, describing how the diner owner's daughter had called Ethan Caldwell Daddy. The comments section was already filling up with speculation and gossip. OMG, is that why he's been eating at the diner so much? One comment read. Always knew there was more to that story, said another. Poor Clara, having to raise his child alone all these years. Clara closed the app, her chest tight with anxiety. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore, it was becoming a real problem. She glanced at Emily's school photo on the wall, her daughter's bright smile seeming to mock the situation they were now in. The phone felt heavy in her hand as she pulled up Ethan's number from their earlier exchange. She paced the kitchen, rehearsing what to say, before finally pressing the call button. Each ring made her heart beat faster. Clara? Ethan's voice was warm and surprisingly relaxed. I was hoping you'd call. I am so sorry about what happened today, Clara blurted out. Emily has such an active imagination, and sometimes she just— A deep chuckle interrupted her. Clara, please don't apologize. Kids say the darndest things, right? That's what they say? But people are already talking. The whole town's going to think— Let them talk, Ethan said easily. Though, if you're worried about it, I might have an idea. Clara leaned against the kitchen counter, twisting a dish towel in her free hand. What kind of idea? Well, I heard Emily mention something about a science fair project while she was making her announcement." His tone was gently teasing. "What if I came by the diner tomorrow? Meet her properly, help with her project a bit? It might help normalize things, show people there's nothing scandalous going on." Clara bit her lip, considering. The offer was thoughtful, practical even, but letting Ethan into their lives, even just to help with a school project. It felt like crossing a line she'd drawn years ago. "I don't know," she said slowly. "Emily gets attached to people pretty quickly, and I don't want her to—" "Get hurt?" Ethan finished softly. "I understand. But Clara, I'm not going anywhere. I chose Seabreeze for a reason. I'm trying to build a life here, a real one." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." After they hung up, Clara stood in the kitchen for a long moment, lost in thought. The sound of footsteps on the stairs snapped her back to the present. "Mommy?" Emily appeared in her pink pajamas, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. "I can't sleep. Are you mad at me?" Clara's heart melted. "Come here, sweetie." She opened her arms and Emily ran into them. "I'm not mad, but we need to talk about what happened today." They settled onto the living room couch, Emily curled against her side like she used to do when she was smaller. "I know I shouldn't have said that about Mr. Caldwell," Emily mumbled into her mother's sweater. "But you looked so happy talking to him, like in those movies where the princess meets her prince." Clara couldn't help but laugh. "Life isn't a movie, honey, and Mr. Caldwell isn't a prince. He's just a nice man who might help you with your science fair project, if you'd like that." Emily's head shot up, eyes wide. "Really? He said he would help?" "He offered. But only if you promise no more daddy comments, okay? That kind of thing can hurt people's feelings." "I promise." Emily's face turned serious. "Is he really a billionaire?" "Tommy at school said he has rockets and robots and stuff. He used to run a big company," Clara explained carefully. "But now he just wants to live a quiet life here, like everyone else. Speaking of which, it's way past bedtime." They headed upstairs, Emily chattering about all the cool things she could do for her science fair project now. Clara helped her into bed, tucking the covers up under her chin just the way she liked. "Mommy?" Emily asked as Clara turned on the nightlight. "Do you like Mr. Caldwell?" Clara paused, choosing her words carefully. "He seems very nice, but sometimes grown-up relationships are complicated." "That's what you always say when you don't want to answer something," Emily said with a knowing smile. Clara kissed her forehead. "Good night, smarty pants. Sweet dreams." Back in her own room, Clara changed into her pajamas and sat on the edge of her bed. The day's events played through her mind like scenes from someone else's life. Finding the phone, the coffee with Ethan, Emily's surprise appearance, and now this offer of help. It all seemed to be moving so fast. She picked up her phone one last time, opening Linda's text thread. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she debated how much to share. Finally, she typed, "Ethan offered to help Emily with her science project. Think I'm going to say yes. Talk tomorrow?" Linda's response came immediately. "Girl, we are definitely talking tomorrow." Clara set her phone on the nightstand and slipped under the covers, listening to the rain that was still falling steadily outside. She'd spent so long keeping their world small and safe, just her and Emily against the world. Now, watching Emily sleep peacefully in the next room, she wondered if she'd been protecting them or hiding. The memory of Ethan's laugh on the phone, warm and genuine, played in her mind. Maybe letting someone in, just a little, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Still, as she drifted toward sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that agreeing to his help would change things in ways she couldn't predict or control. The Saturday lunch rush had finally died down at Henderson's diner. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long rectangles of warmth across the checkered floor tiles. Clara wiped down the counter for the 1,000th time that day, occasionally glancing at Emily, who had spread her science fair materials across 2 tables pushed together in the corner. Papers covered with childish drawings of wind turbines and solar panels lay scattered around her daughter. Colored pencils rolled dangerously close to the edge of the table as Emily's legs swung back and forth, her feet not quite reaching the floor from the booth seat. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated on whatever she was drawing. The bell above the door chimed. Clara looked up, her cleaning cloth frozen mid-wipe as Ethan Caldwell stepped into the diner. He wore casual clothes again, just jeans and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, but somehow still managed to look like he'd walked off the cover of a magazine. A few regular customers stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Mr. Caldwell!" Emily's face lit up like Christmas morning. She waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over her glass of chocolate milk. Clara's heart did a little skip as Ethan smiled and walked toward Emily's corner. She hadn't expected him to show up today, though they'd texted briefly about him helping with the science project. Seeing him in her diner, in her world, felt different than meeting him at that fancy hotel cafe. "What have we got here?" Ethan asked, crouching down beside Emily's table. His genuine interest showed in the way he picked up one of her drawings, studying it carefully. "It's my science fair project," Emily declared proudly. "I'm going to show how we can power the whole town with just the sun and wind and waves." She shuffled through her papers, pulling out her main diagram. "See? The windmills go up on the hill, and the solar panels could go on top of all the buildings, and then we put special floaty things in the ocean to catch the wave power." Clara watched as Ethan nodded seriously, treating Emily's ideas with the same respect he might give to a professional presentation. "That's actually quite clever," he said, pointing to something on her drawing. "Have you considered how you might store the energy for nighttime, or when it's not windy?" Emily's eyes widened. "Oh, I didn't think about that part." "Well, I might know a thing or two about energy storage systems." Ethan pulled up a chair. "Would you like some help figuring it out?" Mrs. Peterson and her bridge club, regulars at table 6, weren't even pretending not to watch anymore. They huddled together, whispering behind their menus while stealing glances at Ethan and Emily. Clara forced herself to look busy, restocking sugar packets that didn't need restocking. She couldn't help overhearing snippets of their conversation as Ethan explained concepts like batteries and power grids in ways that somehow made sense to a 10-year-old. "So it's like having a giant piggy bank for electricity?" Emily asked, scribbling notes with her purple glitter pen. Ethan chuckled. "That's exactly right. You're pretty good at this, you know." Clara noticed how Emily beamed at the praise, how she sat up straighter and tackled her next drawing with renewed enthusiasm. It had been so long since she'd seen her daughter connect with an adult male figure this way. The sight made her chest feel warm and tight at the same time. "Hey, what if we made a working model?" Ethan suggested, sketching something on a fresh piece of paper. "Nothing too complicated, just a small wind turbine and some LED lights to show how the power transfer works." "Really?" Emily bounced in her seat. "Mom, did you hear that? Can we?" Clara walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "I don't know, honey. That sounds pretty complicated." "I have some equipment we could use," Ethan said, looking up at Clara. His eyes were warm and reassuring. "And I promise to keep it simple and safe." More customers were arriving for the late lunch crowd. Clara could feel their curious stares, could practically hear tomorrow's gossip brewing. But Emily's hopeful expression was hard to resist. "Please, Mom?" Emily clasped her hands together. "I'll get the best grade ever." Clara sighed, a small smile tugging at her lips. "All right, but homework and chores still come first." Emily squealed and threw her arms around Ethan's neck, catching him by surprise. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Clara noticed how Ethan's expression softened, how naturally he returned the hug with one arm while carefully avoiding knocking over Emily's drawings with the other. Something about that careful consideration, that instinctive protectiveness, made Clara's defenses waver just a little. "I should get going," Ethan said, standing up. "But I'll bring some materials by next time, if that's okay." He directed this last part to Clara, seeking her permission. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As he headed for the door, several customers suddenly became very interested in their menus or phones. "Goodbye, Mr. Caldwell," Emily called after him. "Don't forget about the LED lights." "Wouldn't dream of it," he called back with a wave. Clara returned to her work behind the counter, trying to ignore Mrs. Peterson's group now openly discussing the handsome gentleman who'd spent time with poor little Emily. But when she glanced over at her daughter a few minutes later, she couldn't help but smile herself. Emily had returned to her drawings, humming happily as she added new details to her renewable energy town, completely oblivious to the stir she'd caused. The sound of that peaceful humming floated across the diner, mixing with the clink of coffee cups and the sizzle of the grill. Clara realized it had been a long time since she'd heard Emily quite so content. Clara's phone buzzed early Sunday morning as she prepared the diner's breakfast service. Emily sat at the counter, munching on toast and practicing her multiplication tables. The caller ID made Clara's heart skip a beat. "Hello?" She tucked the phone between her ear and shoulder while cracking eggs into a bowl. "Good morning, Clara." Ethan's voice was warm and casual. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Just getting ready for the morning rush." She whisked the eggs with more vigor than necessary. "Everything okay? Actually, I was wondering if you and Emily might want to join me at the town playground later? Around 10? There was an eagerness in his tone that made him sound younger somehow. "I've got something in the works there." Emily's head snapped up at the word playground. Her eyes grew wide with hope. Clara hesitated. "I don't know. Sundays are usually pretty busy." "Please, Mom?" Emily stage whispered, practically bouncing on her stool. "Pretty please? I promise it'll be worth your time," Ethan added. "And maybe bring some old clothes you don't mind getting a little messy?" Clara glanced around the diner. Linda, her most reliable waitress, was already setting up the coffee station. The morning looked manageable enough. "Okay," she found herself saying. "We'll be there." When they arrived at the playground just before 10, Clara almost didn't believe her eyes. The usually empty park was filled with people carrying paint cans, tools, and cleaning supplies. A stack of new lumber sat near the old swing set, and someone had already started pressure washing the faded plastic slides. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, tablet in hand, talking to Mr. Chen from the hardware store. He spotted them and waved, jogging over with a bright smile. "You made it." He looked boyishly excited in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. "What do you think?" Emily bounced on her toes. "Are we fixing the playground?" "That's the plan." Ethan gestured at the activity around them. "I noticed it needed some TLC, so I asked around town if anyone wanted to help spruce it up. Turns out, lots of people were just waiting for someone to organize it." Clara took in the scene, touched by how many familiar faces she saw. There was Mrs. Rodriguez from the flower shop painting benches, and the high school baseball team was already taking apart the wobbly monkey bars. "This is amazing," she admitted. "But why didn't you just hire a company to do it?" Ethan's expression grew thoughtful. "Because then it wouldn't be the community's project. This way, everyone gets to be part of making it better." He pulled 3 paintbrushes from his back pocket. "Speaking of which, want to help paint the new fence?" Emily grabbed a brush before Clara could answer. "Can I do blue? Blue's my favorite." For the next few hours, Clara found herself swept up in the enthusiasm of the project. She painted fence posts alongside Emily, cleaned years of grime off the baby swings, and helped hold boards while Ethan and Mr. Chen replaced rotting planks on the play structure. The sun climbed higher, and someone started playing music from a portable speaker. Mrs. Rodriguez brought over sandwiches she'd picked up from the deli, refusing to let Clara pay for her share. The whole scene felt like an old-fashioned barn raising, except with playground equipment instead of barns. Clara watched Ethan as he worked. He moved from group to group, offering help where needed, learning everyone's names, and laughing at their jokes. There wasn't a hint of the billionaire businessman about him, just a guy in a dirty t-shirt who genuinely seemed to care about making things better. "Your friend's something else," Linda said, appearing beside Clara with 2 bottles of water. She'd shown up on her break from the diner to help paint. "Never thought I'd see someone like him getting his hands dirty with the rest of us." Clara accepted the water gratefully. "He's not what I expected." "Mom! Mom!" Emily came running over, her clothes splattered with various colors of paint. "Mr. Ethan says they're going to put in special lights so kids can play here even when it gets dark, and new safety mulch under everything, and maybe even one of those spinny things that you sit on." A merry-go-round, Ethan supplied, walking up behind her. He had a smudge of green paint on his cheek that made him look endearingly human. Though we're going with the modern kind, that's less likely to make kids motion sick. By late afternoon, the playground had transformed. Fresh paint brightened the old equipment, new wooden parts replaced the rotting ones, and the grounds looked cleaner than Clara could ever remember seeing them. As volunteers began packing up their supplies, someone from the electric company arrived to install the new lighting system. Emily convinced Clara to let her stay and watch the lights being put in, so they ended up at the diner later than usual for closing time. As Clara turned the key in the lock, she paused to look across the street. The playground glowed softly in the twilight, the new yellow and blue paint gleaming under the freshly installed lights. A few kids were already playing on the equipment, while their parents watched from the newly painted benches. It felt surreal, how one person could walk into their lives and change things so quickly. Not just the playground, but the way the whole town felt more alive somehow. Clara touched her front door key, the familiar metal warm against her fingers. Everything was the same as it had been yesterday, and yet nothing felt quite the same at all. The Monday morning sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the freshly mopped floor. Clara wiped down the counter with practiced strokes, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. The breakfast rush had dwindled to just a handful of regulars, their coffee cups nearly empty. From behind the counter, she could see Mrs. Peterson and her friend Sandra huddled in the corner booth. They weren't regulars, they usually frequented the newer cafe across town. Their whispered conversation carried across the quiet diner, despite their attempts at discretion. "Did you see them at the playground yesterday?" Sandra's voice had that particular tone that made Clara's skin prickle. All cozy with that billionaire, like she planned it. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, her pearl necklace catching the morning light. "Well, you know single mothers. She's probably been angling to marry rich since her husband passed. Poor Mark wouldn't even recognize her now." Clara's hand tightened around the cloth she was holding. The mention of Mark's name from these women's mouths felt like a violation. She glanced at the clock, grateful Emily was safely at school and couldn't hear this conversation. "Morning, ladies." Clara approached their table with the coffee pot, her professional smile firmly in place. "Can I warm those up for you?" They startled, exchanging guilty looks. "Oh, no, thank you, dear," Mrs. Peterson said with artificial sweetness. "We were just leaving." As they gathered their purses and hurried out, leaving exact change on the table, Clara felt the weight of their judgment settle on her shoulders. She'd known the gossip would come, it was inevitable in a town like Seabreeze, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way social media whispers hadn't. The day crawled by in a blur of coffee refills and lunch orders. Every customer's glance felt loaded with meaning. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about her. By closing time, Clara's shoulders ached with tension. She was counting the register when her phone buzzed. Ethan's name appeared on the screen, and she answered despite her earlier resolution to keep some distance. "Clara?" His voice sounded strained. "Do you have a minute to talk? Is everything okay?" She closed the register drawer with a click. "I received a call from my PR manager today." He paused, and Clara's stomach clenched. She monitors media mentions, and apparently there's been some unflattering chatter about us in local social media groups. Clara sank onto the stool behind the counter. "I know. I heard some of it firsthand today. I'm sorry." The genuine regret in his voice made her throat tight. "My PR team thinks I should distance myself from the situation. They're worried about how it might affect the company's image, even though I'm not actively involved anymore." "Oh." The single syllable came out smaller than she intended. "But I told them no," Ethan continued quickly. "I don't care about gossip or PR strategies. I care about—" He stopped himself. "I mean, I enjoy spending time with you and Emily. These past few days have meant a lot to me." Clara closed her eyes, remembering Emily's beaming face as she worked on her science project with Ethan, the way the playground had come alive with laughter and fresh paint. "It's meant a lot to us, too," she admitted. But I have to think about Emily." Clara stood and began pacing the empty diner. "She's 10. Kids can be cruel, and if their parents are talking, I don't want her to face that kind of scrutiny. She's already lost so much. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. I understand, Ethan finally said. What do you want to do? It was the gentleness in his question that nearly undid her. He wasn't demanding or defensive, just concerned and willing to follow her lead. I don't know, she whispered honestly. After they hung up, Clara finished closing the diner on autopilot. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and worried thoughts. Emily was already asleep when she got home, having been watched by their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez. Clara stood in Emily's doorway, watching her daughter's peaceful breathing. The glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck to her ceiling cast a soft light across her face. On her desk sat the half-finished science project, Ethan's neat handwriting visible on the margins of her notes. In her own bed later, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The thought of cutting Ethan out of their lives made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. He'd slipped into their routine so naturally, bringing a warmth and energy they'd been missing. Emily adored him, and Clara had to admit she'd begun to look forward to his daily texts and unexpected visits to the diner. But was it worth the risk? Worth the whispers and judgment? Worth the possibility of Emily getting hurt when Ethan inevitably moved on to bigger things than their small coastal town could offer? Sleep eluded her as she turned these questions over and over in her mind. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked too. 47 a.m., its red numbers a reminder of another sleepless night, spent wondering if she was making the right choices for her daughter for both of them. The early morning fog rolled in from the ocean, wrapping the quiet streets of Seabreeze in a soft gray blanket. Clara's footsteps echoed on the empty sidewalk as she approached Henderson's diner, her keys jingling in her hand. The sun hadn't quite risen yet, and the streetlights cast warm pools of light through the mist. She stopped short. Through the diner's windows, she could see lights already on inside. Her heart jumped into her throat until she recognized Ethan's silhouette through the glass, standing next to a man she didn't know. They were looking at something in the kitchen. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the door. "Ethan? What's going on?" He turned, a broad smile lighting up his face. "Good morning, Clara. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to surprise you." He gestured to the man beside him. "This is Mike. He's been helping me with a little project." "Project?" Clara's voice came out higher than usual. She stepped forward, peering past them into the kitchen area. Her mouth fell open. The kitchen, her familiar, worn but functional kitchen, had been transformed. Gone were the temperamental old ovens and the scratched stainless steel counters. In their place stood gleaming new equipment, professional-grade ovens with digital displays, spotless work surfaces that seemed to stretch for miles, and a refrigeration system that hummed quietly instead of rattling like her old one. I can't." Clara stumbled forward, running her hand along the smooth counter surface. "How did you do all this?" "When?" "We've been working through the night," Ethan explained, his voice gentle. "Mike's team is the best they can do anything in 12 hours flat." Clara opened one of the ovens, marveling at the soft close feature and perfect seal. "This must have cost." "Don't worry about that," Ethan cut in quickly. "Consider it an investment in the community. This town needs its best diner operating at full capacity." She moved to the prep station, noting how everything was exactly where it should be, just newer and better. Even her old utensils had been replaced with high-end versions that felt perfect in her hands. "But my recipes, all my notes were in the old." "Check the shelf," Ethan said softly. Clara turned to the bookshelf where she kept her recipe collection. There, displayed prominently, was her grandmother's old recipe book, the one that had been falling apart at the seams, held together with rubber bands and hope, only now it wasn't falling apart. The worn leather cover had been expertly restored, the pages carefully preserved and bound. She reached for it with trembling hands. "How?" she whispered, carefully opening the book to find her grandmother's familiar handwriting perfectly preserved on the restored pages. "I know a specialist in book restoration," Ethan explained. "She worked on it personally these past few days. Every page, every note, every margin scribble, it's all there, just protected now." Clara's vision blurred with tears as she ran her fingers over her grandmother's handwritten notes. The paper felt smooth, but still carried that familiar texture she'd known since childhood. The smell of old paper and vanilla extract still lingered in its pages. "You did all this? For me?" She looked up at Ethan, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the gesture. His eyes were warm and sincere. "For you, for Emily, for everyone who loves this place. You've kept this diner going through everything, Clara. You deserve a kitchen that makes your job easier, not harder." Mike cleared his throat. "I should head out. Everything's tested and working perfectly, but here's my card if you need anything adjusted." He placed a business card on the counter and quietly left. Clara stood in the middle of her new kitchen, feeling both grateful and unsettled. The generosity was overwhelming, but something else nagged at her. "Ethan, it's too much. I can't possibly." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will. Because you're not just accepting it for yourself. You're accepting it for every person who walks through that door looking for a piece of home-baked comfort, for every kid who wants their mom's favorite diner to stay open another 20 years. For Emily, who's so proud of what you do here." Clara walked the length of the kitchen again, taking in every detail. They'd matched the color scheme she'd always wanted, but could never afford. The layout was perfect, better than perfect. It was as if someone had reached into her dreams and made them real. Throughout the day, as she worked in her new kitchen, Clara's emotions swung between gratitude and unease. The equipment was amazing. Everything worked exactly as it should. No more fighting with temperamental burners or uneven oven temperatures. But the magnitude of Ethan's gesture made her feel small somehow, reminded her of the vast difference in their worlds. As the sun began to set, Clara found herself pulling out her grandmother's restored recipe book. She turned to the page she knew by heart, her grandmother's award-winning apple pie recipe. The familiar handwriting brought tears to her eyes again, but this time they were happy tears. She gathered her ingredients, loving how everything was within easy reach in her new workspace. The pie-making process had always been therapeutic for Clara, but tonight it felt especially meaningful. She worked the dough with practiced hands, the motion soothing her tumbled emotions. The new oven maintained its temperature perfectly, and soon the smell of baking apples and cinnamon filled the air. When she pulled the first pie from the oven, it was picture-perfect golden brown. She made a second one, then a third, each coming out exactly right. Setting aside the best-looking pie, she carefully wrapped it in a box she reserved for special orders. Later that evening, Clara drove to the Cliffside Inn, the pie box warm on the passenger seat beside her. At the front desk, she left it with a simple note. "Thank you for giving me back my grandmother's kitchen, Clara." Clara pulled her car into the small parking lot by the pier, the pie box balanced carefully on the passenger seat. The evening air carried the salty scent of the ocean, and the setting sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. She spotted Ethan's car, not the flashy vehicle she would have expected from a billionaire, but a modest blue sedan. He was waiting at the pier entrance, hands in the pockets of his casual jacket. When he saw the pie box, his face lit up with genuine delight. "You didn't have to do this," he said, but his eyes crinkled with pleasure. "My grandmother always said kindness should be repaid with kindness," Clara replied, handing him the still warm box. "It's apple made from her recipe. Would you like to walk with me?" Ethan gestured toward the pier. "It's a beautiful evening." Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They fell into step together, the wooden planks creaking softly beneath their feet. The evening crowd was thinning out, just a few couples and families still enjoying the cooling air. "Tell me about Mark," Ethan said quietly after they'd walked a while. "I only knew him briefly during training, but he was always helping others." Clara's heart squeezed at the mention of her late husband, but the pain wasn't as sharp as it used to be. "He was like that from the day I met him. Always putting everyone else first." She smiled at a distant memory. "He once missed our anniversary dinner because he was helping an elderly neighbor fix her roof before a storm. Were you angry?" "I tried to be," Clara laughed softly. But he showed up soaking wet, with a bouquet of slightly crushed flowers, looking so apologetic that I couldn't stay mad. They reached the end of the pier, where the railing offered a view of the endless ocean. The first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Why did you really leave your company?" Clara asked, surprising herself with her directness. The papers all had different theories. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden railing. "Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life?" he finally asked. "Like you'd created this perfect image, but inside you were hollow?" Clara thought about the years after Mark's death, going through the motions, trying to be strong for Emily. "Yes," she said simply. "One morning, I was sitting in yet another board meeting, listening to discussions about profit margins and market share," Ethan continued. "Someone was talking about a new app that would revolutionize social connection, and I suddenly realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a real conversation with anyone, the kind where you actually see the person across from you." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of distant waves. Clara pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders. "So, you just left?" "Not quite that dramatically," he smiled. "I made sure the company was stable, set up foundations for causes I believed in, and then, yes, I left. Bought a house here where nobody knew me, or so I thought." "Until you left your phone in my diner," Clara added, and they both chuckled. "Best mistake I ever made," Ethan said softly, his eyes meeting hers. They turned back, walking more slowly now. The pier lights had come on, casting warm circles of light on the weathered boards. "Starting over is lonely," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After Mark died, everyone was so kind, but they didn't know what to say. Eventually, they stopped trying. It was easier to be the quiet widow who runs the diner." "Is that how you see yourself?" Ethan asked. Clara shook her head. "Not anymore. Emily wouldn't let me stay in that shell even if I wanted to." She smiled, thinking of her daughter's boundless enthusiasm. "She forces me to see the world through her eyes sometimes, where everything is possible and everyone has a story worth knowing." "She's remarkable," Ethan said, "like her mother." They reached the entrance to the pier, where their cars waited in the growing darkness. Clara turned to say goodbye and found Ethan standing closer than she'd realized. The pier light above them cast a soft glow, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Ethan's eyes dropped to her lips, and Clara felt her heart skip. The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. She could feel herself swaying slightly forward, drawn by something both thrilling and terrifying. But then reality crashed back in the town gossip, Emily's vulnerable heart, the vast differences in their worlds. Clara took a small step back, offering a nervous smile instead. "Thank you for the walk," she said softly, "and for listening." The moment passed, leaving behind a bittersweet ache of what if. But when Clara drove home that night, she found herself humming along to the radio, her grandmother's recipes tucked safely in her heart, and the taste of possibility on her lips. The crisp October breeze carried the scent of cotton candy and caramel apples across the sea breeze town square. Clara watched as Emily bounced excitedly between the colorful booths, her ponytail swinging with each step. Ethan walked beside them, looking surprisingly at ease in jeans and a navy sweater that made him seem more like any other dad at the fair than a tech billionaire. "Can we try that one?" Emily pointed to a ring toss game where dozens of glass bottles gleamed under strings of twinkling lights. "Sure, sweetheart," Clara said, reaching for her wallet, but Ethan was already stepping forward with a $5 bill. "My treat," he said with a warm smile that made Clara's chest tighten. "How about we all give it a try?" The teenager running the booth handed them each 3 rings. Emily went first, her tongue poking out in concentration as she aimed. The rings clattered against the bottles, but didn't catch. She frowned, determined, and tried again. "Here," Ethan said, kneeling beside her. "Try holding it like this." He adjusted her grip gently. "Now flick your wrist just like that." Emily's next throw landed perfectly around a bottle's neck. She squealed with delight, jumping up and down. "I did it! Did you see that, Mom?" Clara nodded, fighting back unexpected tears at the sight of her daughter's joy. She couldn't remember the last time they'd done something like this, just being carefree, playing games at a fair. Between work and bills and trying to keep everything together, fun had become a luxury she couldn't often afford. They moved from booth to booth, trying their luck at various games. Ethan proved surprisingly skilled at the baseball throw, knocking down all the milk bottles with ease. "Former Little League pitcher," he explained, with a sheepish grin when Clara raised her eyebrows. The prize booth sparkled with stuffed animals, and Emily's eyes went wide at the sight of an enormous purple bear nearly as tall as she was. "That one," she breathed. Ethan squared his shoulders playfully. Challenge accepted. It took him 3 tries, but finally all the bottles tumbled down. Emily hugged the giant bear, her face half buried in its soft fur. "I'm going to name him Mr. Sparkles," she declared. "Mr. Sparkles?" Clara laughed. "Why's that?" "Because his eyes sparkle like Mr. Ethan's when he looks at you," Emily said matter-of-factly, making both adults blush and look away from each other. The afternoon sun warmed their shoulders as they wandered through the fair. The scent of fried dough drew them to a food stand, where Ethan insisted on buying enough to share. They found a picnic table near the carousel, and Clara watched in amusement as Emily taught Ethan the proper way to eat fried dough, pulling it apart with your fingers and dipping each piece in powdered sugar. "You're getting it everywhere," Clara chuckled, reaching out without thinking to brush sugar from Ethan's chin. Her fingers froze against his skin as she realized what she was doing. Their eyes met, and for a moment the bustling fair seemed to fade away. Emily's voice broke the spell. "Can we ride the carousel, please?" They made their way to the vintage carousel, its painted horses gleaming in the late afternoon light. Emily chose a white horse with a flowing blue mane, while Clara and Ethan stood beside her, one on each side. As the music played and the carousel spun, Clara found herself relaxing into the moment. The worries that usually weighed on her shoulders, the diner's expenses, Emily's upcoming school needs, the constant struggle to make ends meet, felt distant and manageable. Ethan caught her eye over Emily's head and smiled, a gentle expression that made her heart skip. He looked so natural there, holding onto the carousel pole, watching Emily with genuine affection. It would be so easy to let herself believe in this, to imagine more moments like this stretching into the future. But that thought scared her. She'd learned the hard way how quickly happiness could be snatched away. Mark had promised to come home too, had planned futures that never came to be. As if sensing her shift in mood, Ethan reached across the carousel horse and squeezed her hand briefly. The simple gesture somehow both calmed and unsettled her. They spent another hour exploring the fair, Emily's energy seemingly endless as she discovered each new attraction. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fairground, she was finally showing signs of tiredness. "I think it's time to head home," Clara said, noting Emily's slower steps. "Just one more thing," Ethan said, pointing to a booth selling caramel apples. "We can't leave without trying those." They shared a caramel apple on the walk back to the parking lot, Emily taking small, sleepy bites while clutching Mr. Sparkles. The fair lights were twinkling on behind them, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "I can drive you both," Ethan offered, seeing Clara's arms full with Emily's fair prizes and the stuffed bear. Clara normally would have refused, maintaining the careful boundaries she'd built around their lives. But Emily was practically sleepwalking, and the thought of wrestling everything into her old car was daunting. "Thank you," she said softly. "That would help." Ethan helped Emily into the back seat of his car, buckling her in beside Mr. Sparkles. Within minutes of pulling out of the parking lot, she was fast asleep, her head resting against the purple bear's plush shoulder. At a red light, Clara glanced back at her sleeping daughter, then turned to find Ethan already looking at her. Their eyes met in the dim car interior, and something unspoken passed between them. Clara felt her chest tighten with emotions she wasn't ready to name. Ethan's expression was soft, open, full of something that looked remarkably like hope. The light turned green, and they drove on through the quiet streets of Seabreeze, the only sound Emily's gentle breathing from the back seat. The bell above the diner door chimed as Clara stepped inside, stopping in her tracks. Soft golden lights hung from the ceiling in delicate strands, transforming the usual fluorescent-lit space into something magical. Round tables draped in cream-colored cloths dotted the floor, each decorated with small mason jars filled with wildflowers. "Surprise!" Emily bounded forward from behind the counter, wearing her favorite blue dress. "Do you like it?" Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "What's all this?" Ethan emerged from the kitchen, wearing a crisp white shirt with rolled-up sleeves. "I thought the playground volunteers deserved a proper thank-you dinner." He gestured to the decorations. Emily helped with the design. "Those are my drawings." Emily pointed proudly to hand-drawn place cards at each table setting. The diner's usual coffee and burger scent had been replaced by something richer: garlic, herbs, and fresh bread. Through the kitchen window, Clara spotted several covered dishes, warming on the industrial stoves she'd never imagined would host anything fancier than her daily specials. "You didn't have to do all this," Clara said, but she couldn't hide her smile. "I wanted to." Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Besides," Emily insisted, "we needed twinkly lights." Soon, the volunteers began arriving: the hardware store owner who'd donated supplies, the high school students who'd painted equipment, and several regular customers who'd pitched in. The diner filled with cheerful conversation and laughter. Ethan had hired local caterers to serve, allowing Clara to actually sit and enjoy the meal. The food was simple but elegant home-style dishes, elevated just enough to feel special without being pretentious. Clara watched as Emily charmed everyone at their table, proudly explaining how she'd helped arrange the flowers. Halfway through dinner, soft music began playing. Clara turned to see a small trio of musicians setting up in the corner: a guitarist, a violinist, and someone with an upright bass. The gentle melody floated through the air, adding another layer of magic to the evening. "Mom," Emily tugged at Clara's sleeve, "look what Mr. Ethan taught me." She pulled out her phone and opened her camera app. "He showed me how to make mini-movies. I'm going to document everything." Clara laughed. "Everything?" "Especially the dancing," Emily said with a mischievous grin. "Dancing?" Clara's eyebrows shot up. As if on cue, Ethan stood and offered his hand. "May I?" Clara hesitated, very aware of Emily filming and the other guests watching. But something in Ethan's gentle smile made her reach out and take his hand. He led her to the small space they'd cleared between tables. The band smoothly transitioned into an old jazz standard, "The Way You Look Tonight." Clara recognized it from her parents' record collection. "I haven't danced in years," she admitted quietly as Ethan's hand settled respectfully at her waist. "Neither have I," he said. "We can be rusty together." They started slow, swaying more than actually dancing. Clara could feel the warmth of his hand through her dress, smell the subtle cologne he wore. The fairy lights above cast everything in a soft glow. "Emily, come here," one of the volunteers called. "Get a better angle from this side." Emily darted around them, phone held high, giggling as she played filmmaker. Her joy was infectious, and Clara found herself relaxing into the dance. Ethan guided them in a gentle turn. "You're a natural," he murmured. "Flatterer," Clara replied, but she was smiling. The music shifted to something a bit more upbeat, and other couples joined them on the makeshift dance floor. Soon the diner was filled with twirling pairs, laughter, and the occasional playful misstep. During a particularly energetic spin, Clara's heel caught on the floor. Ethan's arms tightened instinctively, keeping her upright, and suddenly they were much closer than before. Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the room seemed to fade away. "Got it." Emily's triumphant voice broke the spell. "That was perfect for my movie." Clara stepped back slightly, cheeks flushed. "Maybe we should check on dessert?" Ethan's eyes sparkled with understanding. "Lead the way." They slipped into the kitchen, where the sounds of the party became muffled. Platters of mini pastries waited on the counter, but neither of them reached for them right away. The band started playing Moon River, the melody drifting through the kitchen window. Without a word, Ethan held out his hand again. Here in the privacy of her kitchen, with only the cooking lights above them, Clara didn't hesitate. They moved together more naturally now, finding an easy rhythm. Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this light, this free. The familiar space where she spent so many hours working had been transformed into something almost enchanted. Emily's face appeared in the window, phone still recording. "This is going to be the best part of my movie," she declared. Clara laughed, resting her forehead against Ethan's shoulder for a moment. "She's unstoppable tonight." "Like mother, like daughter," Ethan said softly. The song ended, and they slowly came to a stop. Through the window, they could see their guests starting to gather their coats, the evening winding down naturally. "We should probably." Clara gestured to the dessert trays. "Right." Ethan stepped back, but his smile remained warm. They carried out the pastries together, served their remaining guests, and said goodbye as people filtered out into the night. Emily helped gather empty plates, humming the songs from earlier under her breath. When the last guest had left, Clara found herself standing in the parking lot, keys in hand. The October air was crisp and clean, carrying the salt scent from the nearby ocean. Ethan walked beside her to her car, their steps slow and unhurried. The fairy lights from inside the diner cast a gentle glow through the windows, making everything feel softer, more magical. Neither spoke, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the lingering warmth of the evening. Monday morning arrived with a chill that had nothing to do with the coastal breeze. Clara pulled into her usual parking spot behind the diner, humming the tune from Saturday night's dance. The weekend's warmth still lingered in her heart, making her steps light as she unlocked the back door. The kitchen gleamed in the early morning light, everything exactly as she'd left it the night before. She went through her usual routine, firing up the ovens, checking the prep lists, and starting the first pot of coffee. The familiar tasks felt different somehow, touched by the memory of dancing between these same counters. When she pushed through the swinging door into the dining room, something was off. Linda, her morning waitress, stood frozen by the counter, clutching a newspaper to her chest. "Linda, what's wrong?" The woman's face was pale. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I tried to grab all the copies before anyone else came in, but—" "What are you talking about?" Clara reached for the paper, but Linda pulled back. "Maybe you should sit down first." "Linda." Clara's voice hardened with worry. "Show me." Reluctantly, Linda placed the folded tabloid on the counter. Clara's world tilted on its axis as she read the bold headline, "Billionaire Caldwell's Secret Love Child in Seaside Town." Below the shocking words was a series of grainy photographs. There was Ethan winning Emily the stuffed bear at the fair, his hand on her shoulder as they laughed together. Another showed them sharing cotton candy, and a third captured them walking with Clara between carnival booths. The images were innocent enough, but the captions twisted everything. Tech tycoon bonds with hidden daughter, and small-town waitress's shocking secret. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the paper. The article was worse than the headline, filled with anonymous sources, claiming she'd been hiding Emily's paternity for years, waiting for the right moment to claim Ethan's fortune. They'd even dug up old photos of Mark in his military uniform, comparing them to recent shots of Ethan to suggest a resemblance. "Who would do this?" she whispered, but she already knew. That persistent reporter who'd been hanging around town events, asking questions about Ethan's presence in Seabreeze. She dismissed him as harmless. The bell above the door chimed. Clara looked up to see Mrs. Peterson, one of her regular breakfast customers, entering with the same tabloid tucked under her arm. The elderly woman's eyes went wide when she spotted Clara, and she hurriedly stuffed the paper into her oversized purse. "I'll get her coffee," Linda murmured, squeezing Clara's shoulder as she passed. Clara retreated to the kitchen, her sanctuary now feeling more like a fishbowl. Through the order window, she could see Mrs. Peterson whispering to another regular who'd just arrived. Both kept glancing her way when they thought she wasn't looking. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily's teacher. Perhaps Emily should stay home today? Several parents have called with concerns. Concerns. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. They were worried about their children associating with Emily, as if gold digging was contagious, as if she and her daughter were somehow tainted. More customers trickled in, each carrying that horrible newspaper. The usual morning chatter was replaced by hushed conversations and furtive looks. Clara could practically hear the whispers. Poor Mark, his memory disgraced. Poor Ethan, trapped by a scheming widow. Poor Emily, a pawn in her mother's game. Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, Channel 7 news van just pulled up outside. What? Clara rushed to the small window overlooking the parking lot. Sure enough, a white van with a satellite dish was idling by the curb. A woman in a blazer was checking her makeup in a compact mirror while a cameraman adjusted his equipment. "I'll tell them you're not available," Linda said firmly, already heading for the door. Clara's phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Henderson, this is Sharon Walsh from Celebrity Weekly. We'd love to hear your side of the story. Our readers are very interested in this modern Cinderella tale." Cinderella tale? Is that what they thought this was? She'd never wanted Ethan's money or fame. She'd only wanted, what? To feel less lonely? To give Emily someone to look up to? To believe, just for a moment, that happiness might be possible again? More texts flooded in other reporters, old friends, even Mark's sister demanding to know if it was true. Each message felt like another stone added to the weight crushing her chest. The kitchen door swung open, and Linda hurried in. "They're not leaving. They want a statement about your relationship with Mr. Caldwell and Emily's paternity." Clara gripped the edge of the stainless steel prep table, her knuckles white. There is no relationship, and Emily's father was Mark. Everyone knows that. Should I call the police? Have them moved along? Before Clara could answer, her phone rang. The screen displayed a familiar name, Ethan Caldwell. She stared at it, remembering how natural it had felt to dance with him in this very kitchen, how right it had seemed to let him into their lives. Now that simple happiness felt like a foolish dream. The phone continued to ring, waiting for her answer. Clara's hand trembled as she reached for her ringing phone. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and her stomach twisted into knots. She almost let it go to voicemail, but the thought of prolonging this moment was unbearable. Taking a deep breath, she answered, "Clara, I'm so sorry." Ethan's voice was strained, lacking its usual warmth. "I just saw the article. This isn't I never wanted. Is it true?" Clara cut in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are they pressuring you to deny everything?" There was a heavy pause on the other end. "My PR team thinks it's best to release a statement," he admitted. "They want me to deny any romantic entanglement. They're worried about how this could affect the company's stock, even though I'm not CEO anymore." Clara's free hand gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. The word entanglement felt like a slap. Was that all this was to him? Her throat tightened as she thought of Emily, of the playground, of dancing in this very kitchen just days ago. "Clara?" Ethan's voice grew urgent when she didn't respond. "Please understand, I don't want to do this. I care about you and Emily. We can figure something out." "Figure something out?" Clara's voice cracked. "They're calling my daughter your secret love child. They've turned our lives into some trashy scandal, and now you're going to publicly announce that we mean nothing to you? That's not what The whole town is probably reading this right now," Clara continued, her words tumbling out faster. "Do you know what they'll say about us? About Emily? She has to go to school here, Ethan. These are her classmates' parents reading this garbage." Through the phone, she could hear him pacing. "Let me come over. We can talk about this face to face. There has to be a better way." "No," Clara said firmly, though her heart ached. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. I knew letting someone into our lives would only end up hurting Emily." "Clara, please." "You have your world, and we have ours." She cut him off again, her voice growing stronger despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "You should go back to it, release your statement, deny everything. Just stay away from us." "I won't do that," Ethan insisted. "What we have, what we're building here, it matters to me. You matter to me." Clara closed her eyes, remembering Emily's excited face when Ethan helped with her science project, the way her daughter had started to look for him every time the diner door opened. "If you care about us at all," she said softly, "you'll respect my decision. Emily can't handle another person walking out of her life. Better to end it now before." She couldn't finish the sentence. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Clara." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "Goodbye, Ethan." She hung up before he could respond. For several minutes, Clara stood motionless in the empty diner, her phone clutched to her chest. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the fresh paint on the walls, the gleaming new equipment he'd given her. Everything in this space held memories of him now. The bell above the door chimed, making her jump. It was Mrs. Peterson, one of her regular breakfast customers, clutching what looked suspiciously like today's newspaper. Clara couldn't bear to see the pity or worse, the judgment in her eyes. Walking to the door on shaky legs, Clara flipped the sign to "Closed" and locked up. She moved through the kitchen, turning off the ovens she'd just heated, unplugging the coffee maker that was mid-brew. The familiar space that had always been her sanctuary now felt suffocating. In the darkness of the empty kitchen, Clara finally let her tears fall. They came silently at first, then in great, heaving sobs that echoed off the walls. She slid down against the new refrigerator, holding herself as she cried for everything she'd just pushed away, not just Ethan, but the possibility of happiness she'd allowed herself to glimpse. The morning light continued to brighten outside the windows, but Clara remained in the shadows of her darkened kitchen, alone once again. The diner's bell chimed with its usual cheerful tone, but to Clara it felt hollow now. 5 days had passed since the article, since that awful phone call. She moved through her routines like a ghost pour coffee, take orders, smile mechanically. The familiar rhythm of the diner that once brought her comfort now felt like an endless loop she couldn't escape. "More coffee, Linda?" Clara asked, forcing brightness into her voice as she approached her friend's usual booth. Linda's eyes were full of concern. "Honey, you've already filled my cup twice in the last 10 minutes. Clara looked down at the coffee pot in her hand, noticing how it trembled slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'm a little distracted." "A little?" Linda reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're working yourself to the bone. When was the last time you took a break?" Clara pulled away, busying herself with wiping down the already spotless counter. She'd been taking extra shifts, volunteering to close every night. Anything to keep her mind off the empty spaces Ethan had left behind the corner booth, where he'd helped Emily with her project, the kitchen he'd so thoughtfully renovated. Emily's voice carried from her homework spot near the window. "Mom, can we call Ethan? I need help with the solar panel alignment." Clara's hand stilled on the counter. "Sweetie, remember what we talked about? Mr. Caldwell is very busy right now." "But he promised to help." Emily's lower lip trembled. "He said he'd be there for the science fair presentation." The familiar ache in Clara's chest intensified. Every day, it was the same conversation, just with different words. "Why isn't Ethan coming? When will we see him again? Did I do something wrong?" "Here," Clara said, moving to sit beside her daughter. "Let's look at those diagrams together. I may not be a tech genius, but I can still help." They spent the next hour working on the project, Clara throwing herself into learning about solar energy and sustainable power. Emily's enthusiasm would spark occasionally, but Clara could see the disappointment lingering in her eyes. That evening, after closing, Clara stood at the sink, washing dishes. The new industrial dishwasher Ethan had installed sat unused. She needed the mindless task of scrubbing plates to keep her thoughts at bay. But even here, his presence lingered. The gleaming new appliances, the restored recipe books carefully arranged on the shelf, all of it screamed his name. "Mom?" Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, already in her pajamas. "Can we walk by the playground tomorrow? Just to see if—" "No, sweetie," Clara cut in gently. "How about we work on your presentation skills instead? The science fair is only 2 weeks away." Emily's shoulders slumped, but she nodded. As Clara tucked her into bed later that night, she noticed the giant stuffed bear from the fair had been shoved into the closet. Her daughter was trying to be brave, but Clara knew she was hurting. Sleep eluded Clara that night, as it had every night since the article. She tossed and turned, remembering the warmth in Ethan's eyes when he watched Emily work, the way his hand had felt on her waist as they danced in the kitchen, the genuine care in his voice when he talked about the town's needs. Had it all been an illusion? The next few days blurred together. Clara took the long way to work, avoiding the newly repaired playground where mothers still gathered to gossip. She kept her eyes down when walking past the cafe where they'd first had coffee. The local paper sat untouched in its rack. At the diner, she couldn't bear to see if there were any more stories. Saturday evening came, bringing with it a stunning sunset that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Clara had just finished the evening shift and was walking home along the beach road, her arms wrapped around herself against the cooling air. As she approached the intersection that led to the pier, she saw him. Ethan sat alone on their bench, the same one where they'd talked about Mark, about starting over, about second chances. His shoulders were slumped, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Even from this distance, she could see the weariness in his posture. For a moment, Clara's feet slowed. Part of her wanted to walk over, to hear what he would say, to understand why he hadn't fought harder against his PR team's demands. The same part that still woke up reaching for her phone, hoping to see his name on the screen. But then she remembered Emily's tears, the whispers in town, the humiliation of seeing their lives splashed across tabloid pages. Without allowing herself another glance, Clara turned and walked the other way, taking the long route home along darkening streets. The sound of waves crashing against the shore followed her, a reminder of all the quiet conversations they'd shared by that water. She quickened her pace, as if she could outrun the memories themselves, but they clung to her like the salt spray in the air. Monday mornings at the Henderson household usually moved like molasses, but today Emily practically bounced off the walls. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, packing Emily's lunch while trying to keep up with her daughter's endless stream of chatter. "Only 3 more days until the STEM fair," Emily announced, for what felt like the 100th time, her cereal barely touched. She sat at their small kitchen table, legs swinging, her science project folder clutched to her chest. "Ms. Thompson says the judges are really important this year. They're coming from the big university." Clara nodded, carefully wrapping Emily's sandwich in wax paper. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Have you finished all your display charts?" "Almost." Emily's ponytail bobbed as she finally spooned some cereal into her mouth. "I just need to add the last graph about wind power versus solar panels. My project is going to show everyone how we can save the planet." Clara smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. The kitchen seemed quieter these days, emptier somehow. She pushed the thought away and focused on arranging apple slices into a little heart shape in Emily's lunchbox, the small touches that made her daughter feel special. "Mom?" Emily's voice had softened. "Do you think my project is good enough?" Clara turned, seeing the flash of uncertainty in her daughter's eyes. She crossed the kitchen and knelt beside Emily's chair. "Your project is amazing. You've worked so hard on it, and it shows. The judges are going to love seeing how much you care about helping the environment." Emily twisted a strand of hair around her finger. "It's just. Some of the other kids have really fancy displays. Jenny's dad got her a professional poster board, and Marcus has a working robot." "Hey now," Clara said, tucking the loose strand behind Emily's ear. "It's not about having the fanciest equipment. It's about your ideas and how well you explain them. Your renewable energy project could actually help people." "That's what Mr. Ethan said too," Emily mumbled, looking down at her cereal. The name hung in the air between them. Clara's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Come on, finish your breakfast. We need to leave in 15 minutes." While Emily hurried to get ready, Clara cleaned up the kitchen, trying to ignore the familiar ache in her chest. The past week had been harder than she'd expected. Every little reminder of Ethan, the newly refurbished diner kitchen, the playground he'd helped repair, even the morning coffee she'd grown used to sharing with him, felt like a small wound reopening. At school, Clara walked Emily to her classroom, carrying the science project folder while Emily skipped ahead. Outside the classroom door, they ran into Emily's best friend Sophie and her mom. "Emily," Sophie called out, "did you finish your wind turbine diagram?" "Almost." Emily rushed over to her friend. The two girls immediately lost in excited conversation about their projects. Clara handed over the folder and gave Emily a quick hug. "Have a great day, sweetie. I'll pick you up after school and we can work on those final touches." She was about to turn away when she heard Sophie ask, "Is Mr. Ethan coming to see your project? You said he knows all about green energy and stuff?" Clara froze, her hand still on the classroom doorframe. "I hope so." Emily's voice was quiet but clear. "He helped me figure out how to make the solar panel demo work. He said he'd never miss it. But—" She trailed off, and Clara could hear the confusion and disappointment in her daughter's voice. "That would be so cool if he came," Sophie exclaimed. "Remember when he brought those special batteries for your experiment? My dad said he's like a real-life Tony Stark." Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't realized how much Emily had been counting on Ethan's presence at the fair. She'd been so focused on protecting her daughter from gossip and scandal that she hadn't considered how much Emily had come to care about him. The girls' chatter continued, but Clara stepped away, needing a moment to compose herself. She'd thought she was doing the right thing by cutting ties, by keeping Emily safe from the media circus that surrounded Ethan. But listening to her daughter's hopeful voice, she wondered if she'd made things worse. Walking back to her car, Clara remembered how Ethan had spent hours with Emily, patiently explaining complex concepts in ways a 10-year-old could understand. He'd never talked down to her, never dismissed her ideas. Instead, he'd encouraged her curiosity, challenged her to think bigger, and celebrated every small breakthrough. At a red light, Clara caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. She forced a smile, practicing the expression she'd need to maintain when Emily brought up Ethan again, which she inevitably would. But the guilt gnawed at her. Emily had lost one father figure already. Now Clara had pushed away someone else who had started to fill that void. The light turned green, and Clara drove toward the diner, her thoughts a tangled mess of worry and regret. She'd wanted to protect Emily from hurt, but maybe she'd been protecting herself instead. The STEM fair was supposed to be Emily's moment to shine, and Clara had let her own fears cast a shadow over it. Pulling into the diner's parking lot, Clara sat in her car for a moment, remembering Emily's words. He said he'd never miss it. The same determination that had made Clara return a stranger's phone that rainy night stirred in her chest. She needed to find a way to make this right, not for herself and not for Ethan, but for the little girl who deserved to have everyone who cared about her cheering her on. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows of the Henderson home. Clara stood at the counter, carefully wrapping Emily's homemade breakfast sandwich in wax paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the edges, her mind wandering to the empty seat at their breakfast table where Ethan had sat just weeks ago, helping Emily practice her presentation. "Mom, can you help me with the poster board?" Emily called from the living room, her voice filled with nervous energy. "I don't want it to get bent in the car." Clara tucked the sandwich into Emily's favorite lunch bag and headed to the living room. Emily stood beside her renewable energy project, a miniature windmill made from recycled materials that powered a small LED light. The centerpiece was surrounded by carefully arranged graphs and photos, all mounted on a trifold display board, decorated in bright blues and greens. "It looks beautiful, sweetie," Clara said, running her hand along the edge of the poster board. Her chest tightened as she remembered Ethan kneeling beside Emily at the diner, sketching design ideas on napkins and explaining wind resistance with sugar packets. Emily beamed, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Do you think?" she started, then stopped herself, fidgeting with the hem of her new dress, the one she'd specifically picked out for today. Clara knew exactly what her daughter wanted to ask, the same question that had hung in the air all week like a rain cloud that refused to break. Instead of addressing it, she forced cheerfulness into her voice. "Let's get this loaded up, shall we? We don't want to be late." Together, they carried the project out to their old station wagon. Clara had cleared the entire back seat, laying down a blanket to protect Emily's hard work. The morning air was crisp with early autumn, and their breath formed small clouds as they carefully maneuvered the display board through the car door. "Watch the corner there," Clara guided, helping Emily slide the project into position. "Perfect. Now let's secure it with these bungee cords so it doesn't tip over." As they worked, Mrs. Martinez from next door walked by with her dog. "Good luck today, Emily," she called out. "That project of yours looks mighty impressive." Emily's face lit up. "Thank you. I worked really hard on it. Mr. Ethan helped me figure out the angle for the blades to catch the most wind and—" She stopped abruptly, glancing at her mother. Clara busied herself with adjusting the bungee cord, pretending not to notice the awkward silence that followed. Mrs. Martinez gave them a small wave and continued her walk. Back inside, Clara helped Emily gather her presentation notes and the bag of spare parts she'd insisted on bringing just in case. Emily stood in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing her dress and adjusting the butterfly clips in her hair. "Do I look professional enough?" she asked, turning from side to side. Clara's heart squeezed. "You look perfect, honey, like a real scientist." The drive to school was unusually quiet. Emily clutched her note cards, mouthing her presentation silently to herself. Clara kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel, trying to focus on the road and not on memories of Ethan's encouraging words about Emily's project. The school parking lot was already filling up when they arrived. Parents and children carried projects of all sizes toward the gymnasium. Some looked like they'd been thrown together last night, while others were clearly the work of weeks of dedication. "Remember," Clara said as they parked, "no matter what happens today, I'm already so proud of you. You've worked incredibly hard on this." Emily nodded, but her eyes were scanning the parking lot. Clara pretended not to notice her daughter's shoulders slump slightly when she didn't spot a certain expensive car among the minivans and sedans. Inside the gymnasium, the air hummed with excitement. Long tables lined the basketball court, each with a number taped to the front. Student projects filled the space with color and movement. Volcanoes bubbled, plants grew under special lights, and various contraptions whirred and spun. "We're number 43, Clara said, consulting the sheet they'd been given. They made their way through the crowd, carefully carrying Emily's project between them. The gym was warm with so many people packed inside. Parents chatted in clusters while kids made last-minute adjustments to their displays. Teachers moved between tables with clipboards, and a group of important-looking adults in business attire, presumably the judges, gathered near the stage. Clara helped Emily set up her display, making sure the windmill had enough space to spin freely. She found herself glancing toward the gymnasium doors every few minutes, though she kept telling herself she was just checking for the judges. Emily arranged and rearranged her visual aids, then practiced turning on her LED light for the 100th time. "Do you think the judges will like it?" she asked, her voice smaller than usual. "They're going to love it," Clara assured her, though her heart ached at the real question her daughter wasn't asking. "You know this project inside and out." A bell rang, signaling that judging would begin in 15 minutes. Around them, other parents were giving last-minute hugs and encouragement before moving to the designated viewing area. Clara knelt down to Emily's level, straightening her butterfly clips one final time. "Mom?" Emily's lower lip trembled slightly. "Is Mr. Ethan really not coming?" Clara took a deep breath, fighting back her own emotions. "Sweetie, I don't think—" "But he helped me so much," Emily interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. "He said he'd be here." Clara pulled her daughter into a tight hug, feeling Emily's disappointment in the way her small shoulders sagged. "I know, baby. I know." She pulled back, cupping Emily's face in her hands. "But you've got this. You understand every part of this project. You did the work. You're going to be amazing." Emily nodded bravely, but Clara could see the shine of unshed tears in her eyes. She watched as her daughter turned to her display, adjusting the angle of her poster board one last time. The empty space beside their table seemed to grow larger with each passing minute, and Clara's heart felt heavy as she prepared to join the other parents in the viewing section. "You can do this," Clara whispered, giving Emily's shoulder a final squeeze. Then she stepped back, leaving her daughter standing alone at table 43, waiting for judges who weren't the person she really wanted to see. The school gymnasium hummed with nervous energy as students made final adjustments to their projects. Parents huddled along the walls, phones ready to capture proud moments. Emily stood before her renewable energy display, fidgeting with the small wind turbine she'd built from recycled materials. Clara watched from nearby, her heart aching at how Emily kept glancing toward the gym entrance. The judges, 3 local science teachers in pressed shirts and clipboards, began their slow procession down the first row of projects. Emily's shoulders drooped slightly as she realized she'd be presenting without her mentor. Next up, Emily Henderson's project on wind energy, announced Mrs. Martinez, the head judge, as the group approached. Emily took a deep breath, just like she'd practiced. But before she could speak, the heavy gym doors swung open with a loud creak that made everyone turn. Ethan Caldwell stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath, holding a large covered display board. His usual casual attire had been replaced by a proper suit, though his tie was slightly crooked. Several parents whispered and pointed, recognizing the man from recent newspaper photos. "I apologize for interrupting," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the now silent gymnasium. He walked purposefully toward Emily's station, nodding respectfully to the judges. "But I couldn't miss this presentation." Clara felt her cheeks flush as dozens of eyes darted between her, Emily, and Ethan. She wanted to disappear, to protect Emily from whatever scene might unfold. But Emily's face had lit up like a Christmas tree. "Before Emily shows you her excellent work," Ethan continued, addressing not just the judges but the entire room, "I'd like to say something important." He set down his covered board and straightened his tie. "There's been a lot of talk in town lately about Clara Henderson and her daughter. Unkind rumors, unfair judgments." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She started to step forward, to stop him, but something in his steady gaze made her pause. "The truth is," Ethan's voice softened with genuine emotion, "Clara Henderson is the most honest, hard-working person I've ever met. When she found my phone at her diner, she could have ignored it. Instead, she went out of her way to return it personally. Not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do." He turned to face Clara directly. "You've shown me what real integrity looks like. You've reminded me why I left the corporate world, because I was losing touch with what truly matters: simple kindness, community, helping others grow." Emily beamed at her mother, pride shining in her eyes. Around the gym, the whispers had shifted from gossipy to appreciative. Clara felt tears threatening to spill but blinked them back. "Which brings me to this," Ethan said, reaching for the covered board. With a flourish, he removed the cloth, revealing architectural renderings of a state-of-the-art science laboratory. "In honor of Emily Henderson's passionate interest in renewable energy and in recognition of her mother's character, I'm announcing the funding of a new science lab for Seabreeze Elementary." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Martinez's clipboard dropped to her side as she stared at the detailed plans. "The Emily Henderson Innovation Lab will give future young scientists the tools they need to explore, create, and maybe even save our planet." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Because that's what happens when we believe in people, when we judge them by their actions, not by rumors or appearances." The gymnasium erupted in applause. Emily launched herself at Ethan, wrapping him in a fierce hug. Parents who had avoided Clara's eyes for weeks were now smiling warmly at her. The judges looked thoroughly impressed, though Mrs. Martinez was trying to restore order so Emily could still give her presentation. Clara stood rooted to her spot, one hand pressed to her heart, completely speechless. The walls she'd built so carefully around her heart were crumbling, and for the first time in years, she didn't try to stop them. The applause continued, punctuated by camera flashes and excited chatter. Through it all, Ethan's eyes found Clara's, holding her gaze with a warmth that made everything else fade away. His public defense of her character, his gift to the school in Emily's name, it was more than a grand gesture. It was a promise that he saw her, truly saw her, and wasn't afraid to stand beside her regardless of what anyone thought. Mrs. Martinez finally managed to quiet the crowd, though excited whispers still bounced off the gymnasium walls. "Well," she said, smoothing her jacket and trying to look stern despite her smile, "I believe we were about to hear Emily Henderson's presentation?" Emily nodded eagerly, practically bouncing on her toes as she launched into her carefully prepared speech about wind energy. Her words carried new confidence, powered by the morning's unexpected turn of events. Clara watched her daughter shine, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't quite name. The crowd remained attentive, but many eyes kept drifting between Clara and Ethan, seeing them now not as subjects of gossip, but as people who had touched their community in meaningful ways. The applause that had greeted Ethan's announcement still seemed to echo in the air, a sound of acceptance and appreciation that wrapped around Clara like a warm embrace. The school hallway felt eerily quiet compared to the bustling gymnasium they'd just left. Clara leaned against the wall, her mind still processing everything that had happened. The colorful student artwork decorating the walls seemed to blur as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. She heard footsteps approaching and quickly wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "Clara?" Ethan's voice was soft, hesitant. She turned to face him, noticing his tie was still crooked from his rushed entrance earlier. The sight made her heart squeeze with a familiar warmth she'd been trying to ignore. "That was quite an entrance," she said, attempting a smile that came out wobbly. "I've been told I have a flair for the dramatic." He stepped closer, his expression growing serious. "But Clara, I need you to know how sorry I am. I let fear control my actions. When my PR team started pressuring me, I should have immediately told them to back off." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she'd developed over years of protecting her heart. "You had your reputation to think about." "My reputation?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look more like the casual man she'd grown to care for. "Clara, do you know what my reputation was before I came to Seabreeze? I was known as the tech genius who walked away from his own company, the billionaire who had everything but seemed to want nothing." He took another step closer. "But here, with you and Emily, I found something real, something that actually matters. And instead of standing up for that, I let some PR team tell me what to do, just like I used to let my board of directors control my life." "I was scared too," Clara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not of the gossip or the tabloids, but of letting someone in again. Of Emily getting attached and then, she couldn't finish the sentence. "And then losing them like she lost her father," Ethan completed gently. "I understand that fear, Clara. But these past few weeks without you both, I've never felt more lost. I missed your laugh, the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating on a recipe, how you always save the slightly burnt cookies for yourself, because you know Emily likes the soft ones." Clara felt her defenses crumbling. "I missed you too. Emily kept asking about you every day. She wouldn't even let me help with the final touches on her project because she said you were her science partner." "Speaking of Emily," Ethan glanced down the hallway, "I hope what I did in there wasn't too much. I know you're private about your life, but I couldn't stand the thought of anyone in this town thinking poorly of you because of me." "It was unexpected," Clara said, finding herself smiling genuinely now. "But watching you defend us like that, seeing how much you care about Emily's future, it meant everything." The sound of running footsteps echoed down the hall, and they both turned to see Emily sprinting toward them, her science fair ribbon fluttering behind her. "Mr. Ethan, Mom!" she called out, launching herself at them both. Without thinking, Clara and Ethan moved together to catch her in a group hug, their arms overlapping. "Did you see? Did you see?" Emily bounced excitedly. "Second place, and Mrs. Martinez said my wind turbine design was super innovative." "We saw, sweetheart," Clara said, smoothing Emily's hair. "We're so proud of you." "And the new science lab," Emily continued, her words tumbling out in excitement. "Is it really going to be named after me? Will it have real microscopes? Can I help design it?" Ethan chuckled, still part of their three-way embrace. "Yes to all of those questions. But first," he looked at Clara, his eyes asking permission, "I think this calls for a celebration. How about dinner? I know a place that makes amazing milkshakes." Emily gasped. "Mom, can we? Please?" "I want to tell Mr. Ethan all about my presentation, and about how Jenny's volcano exploded too early, and about—" "Breathe, sweetie," Clara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She looked at Ethan, seeing the hope in his eyes, the same hope she felt building in her own heart. "Yes, we can go to dinner." "Yes." Emily pumped her fist in the air. "This is the best day ever. First the ribbon, then the lab, and now we're all together again." She squeezed them both tightly before stepping back, her eyes sparkling with mischief. And Mom, your cookies were definitely better than Mrs. Peterson's at the bake sale table. Even the burnt ones." "Hey," Clara protested, but she was laughing. Ethan reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "She's right, you know, about everything being better when we're together." Clara looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. The nervousness that had plagued her earlier was melting away, replaced by a feeling of rightness. "Yes," she said softly, "I think she is." The Bell Anchor restaurant sat nestled against the shoreline, its weathered blue exterior glowing warmly in the evening light. Through the front windows, soft lamplight spilled onto white tablecloths, and the smell of fresh bread and grilled seafood welcomed them as they stepped inside. "I used to work here as a waitress in high school," Clara whispered to Ethan as the hostess led them to a corner booth overlooking the water. Emily skipped ahead, her science fair ribbon proudly pinned to her dress. The leather seats creaked as they settled in, Emily immediately scooting close to Clara while Ethan sat across from them. A candle flickered between them, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Clara couldn't help but notice how the light softened Ethan's features, making him look younger, more carefree. "Can I get a strawberry lemonade?" Emily asked, already reaching for the children's menu. "And maybe the fish and chips?" "Of course, sweetheart," Clara smiled, then caught herself glancing at Ethan. Old habits died hard. She was used to watching every penny. "Order whatever you'd like," Ethan said softly, reading her mind. "This is a celebration, after all." Their waitress, Sandy, whom Clara knew from church, approached with a warm smile. "Well, if it isn't our local science star. I heard about your project, Emily. Renewable energy, right?" Emily beamed, launching into an enthusiastic explanation of her solar-powered water purifier. Clara watched her daughter gesture animatedly, pride swelling in her chest. Across the table, Ethan listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emily's eyes light up even more. After they ordered, Emily pulled out her ribbon again, running her fingers over the blue silk. "Mr. Peterson said my project might even get featured in the local paper." "That's wonderful," Ethan said, then added with a wink. "Though I suspect they might be more interested in the new science lab." Clara felt her cheeks warm, remembering his speech at the fair. "You really didn't have to do that, you know." "I wanted to." His eyes met hers, sincere and unwavering. "The town needs it, and Emily inspired it. Simple as that." Their appetizers arrived, fresh clam chowder, and a plate of calamari that Emily insisted on trying, then declared too chewy. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from Emily's school adventures to Clara's latest experimental recipes at the diner to Ethan's stories about growing up in a small town himself. "Wait," Clara laughed, setting down her spoon. "You really built a robot out of your mom's vacuum cleaner?" "In my defense, I was 12, Ethan chuckled, "and I did eventually buy her a new one, after she finished grounding me for a month." Emily giggled, dunking a piece of bread in her soup. "Can you teach me how to build robots?" "How about we start with something simpler?" Clara suggested, though she couldn't help smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Maybe after you've mastered not leaving your shoes in the middle of the hallway?" Their main courses arrived, steaming plates of fresh seafood that made Emily's eyes widen. Clara had ordered the grilled salmon, and the first bite melted in her mouth. She noticed Ethan watching her reaction and felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the food. As they ate, Clara found herself relaxing more than she had in weeks. The weight of the gossip, the tabloid article, the worried glances from townspeople, it all seemed to fade away in the warm bubble of their corner booth. She watched Emily steal a shrimp from Ethan's plate, him pretending not to notice, and felt something shift in her heart. "Try this," Ethan said, offering her a bite of his sea bass. Without thinking, she leaned forward and accepted it from his fork. Their eyes met, and the moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words. Emily's voice broke the spell. "Can we get dessert?" They ended up sharing a massive slice of chocolate cake, 3 forks diving in as Emily told them about her plans for future science projects. Clara noticed how naturally Ethan fit into their conversation, how easily he drew out Emily's thoughts and encouraged her ideas. "Maybe next time we could do something with marine biology," Emily mused, scraping the last bit of chocolate frosting from the plate. "Since we live by the ocean and all. Next time?" Clara raised an eyebrow, but she was smiling. "Well, yeah," Emily said matter-of-factly. "Mr. Ethan's going to help me again, right?" Clara felt, rather than saw Ethan's gaze turn to her, waiting for her response. She took a deep breath, looking at her daughter's hopeful face, then at the man across the table who had somehow worked his way into their lives. "I think," she said slowly, "that would be nice." The smile that spread across Ethan's face made her heart skip. Outside, the sun had set, leaving the restaurant bathed in the warm glow of lanterns. The water beyond the windows had turned silver in the moonlight. As they stood to leave, Emily yawned widely. "Can we walk on the beach before we go home?" "It's getting late, sweetie," Clara started, but Ethan stepped in. "How about we save that for another night? When you're not about to fall asleep standing up?" Emily nodded, already leaning against Clara's side. The fact that Ethan had said another night, so casual, so certain, made Clara's pulse quicken. They made their way to the door, Emily trudging sleepily ahead. Just before they stepped outside, Ethan reached for Clara's hand. His fingers were warm as they laced through hers, and she found herself holding on tight. The cool night air greeted them as they stepped onto the wooden deck of the restaurant. Stars twinkled overhead, and the sound of waves lapping at the shore provided a gentle backdrop to their footsteps. The evening air carried a gentle salt breeze as Clara, Emily, and Ethan left the Belle Anti-Anchor. Their laughter from dinner still lingered, warming the cool night around them. Emily spotted the pier's twinkling lights, stretching out over the dark water. "Can we walk to the end?" Emily bounced on her toes, her science fair ribbon catching the light. "Please, Mom?" Clara glanced at her watch, then at Ethan, who smiled encouragingly. "Just for a little while, sweetie. It's getting late." They made their way onto the wooden planks, their footsteps creating a soft rhythm against the weathered boards. Above them, strings of white lights crisscrossed between posts, casting a gentle glow that made the night feel magical. The waves lapped softly below, providing a peaceful backdrop to their walk. Emily ran ahead, weaving between the light posts and stopping to peer through the railing at the dark water below. Her excitement was contagious, and Clara found herself smiling as she watched her daughter's carefree movements. "She's amazing," Ethan said softly beside her, just like her mother. Clara felt warmth spread across her cheeks. "She's certainly full of energy tonight." The science fair was a big deal for her. "For all of us," Ethan added, his hand finding hers as they walked. His palm felt warm against hers, and she didn't pull away. They reached the midpoint of the pier, where a wider platform housed several benches. Emily had discovered a family of seagulls and was watching them with fascination, giving Clara and Ethan a moment of relative privacy. "Clara," Ethan began, turning to face her. The string lights reflected in his eyes as he looked at her intently. "These past few weeks, despite everything that happened, they've meant more to me than you know." She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "For us too. Emily talks about you constantly." "Just Emily?" His tone was gentle, hopeful. Clara laughed softly, looking out at the darkness where the ocean met the sky. "No, not just Emily." Ethan squeezed her hand. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want in my life. Why I left my company, why I chose this town." He paused, watching Emily, who was now counting the seagulls out loud. "I thought I came here looking for peace and quiet, but I found something better. Something real." The waves crashed rhythmically below them as Clara absorbed his words. The salty air filled her lungs as she took a deep breath, feeling the familiar wall around her heart starting to crumble. "I know the tabloid situation scared you," he continued. "It scared me too, but not for the reasons you might think. I was afraid it would drive you away permanently, that I'd lose this chance at something genuine." Clara turned to face him fully. "I was scared too. Not of the gossip, really, but of letting someone in, of trusting that you'd stay." "I want to stay," Ethan said firmly. "I want to be part of your lives, yours and Emily's, not just as an occasional visitor or friend, but really part of it, if you'll let me." The honesty in his voice made Clara's heart flutter. She looked at Emily, still fascinated by the seagulls, then back at Ethan. All the reasons she'd built up to keep people at arm's length seemed to fade in the face of his sincere expression. "I think," she started slowly, "I think I'm ready for that. We're ready for that." Emily's delighted squeal at discovering a baby seagull provided the perfect punctuation to Clara's words. The sound of her daughter's joy, combined with the warmth of Ethan's presence beside her, felt right in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Ethan reached up, his hand gently cupping her cheek. The string lights cast soft shadows across his face as he leaned closer. Clara's heart thundered in her chest as his lips met hers in a gentle kiss, sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Emily's voice carried across the pier. "Finally!" she called out, making them both laugh. She ran over and wrapped her arms around them both, creating a group hug that felt like the beginning of something wonderful. The waves continued their endless dance below, the lights twinkled overhead, and in that moment, on a wooden pier in a small coastal town, Clara felt her world shift into place. The Monday morning sun filtered through the diner's front windows, casting warm rectangles across the checkered floor. Clara hummed as she arranged fresh flowers in a small vase at the counter, something she hadn't done in years. The bell above the door chimed, and Ethan walked in, carrying his laptop and a paper bag. "Good morning," he said, settling into what had become his usual spot at the counter. "I brought those math worksheets Emily mentioned." Clara poured him coffee without asking, the gesture already familiar. "You're spoiling her, you know. Most kids don't get private tutoring from a tech genius." "Most kids aren't Emily," he replied with a soft smile. "Besides, I like helping. Makes me feel useful." Throughout the morning rush, Clara noticed how naturally Ethan had woven himself into the diner's rhythm. He worked on his laptop between helping customers when she got busy, refilled coffee for elderly regulars, and chatted with the locals who'd finally stopped whispering about him. By Tuesday afternoon, Emily burst through the diner doors after school, her backpack bouncing. "Mr. Ethan, I got an A on my math test." She ran straight to where he sat in his usual spot. "Let me see that," he said, examining her test paper with exaggerated seriousness. "Outstanding work, Professor Henderson." He high-fived her, and Clara caught herself smiling at their interaction. Wednesday brought rain, but it didn't stop Ethan from showing up at the playground with waterproof tarps and a crew of workers. Clara watched from the diner window as they installed new safety padding under the swings. Emily sat at the counter, drawing elaborate thank you cards for everyone helping. "Mom," Emily said, coloring carefully, "can we make hot chocolate for the workers? They look cold." Clara gathered supplies while Emily helped prepare a thermos of hot chocolate. Together, they delivered it to the playground, where Ethan's hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain. "You two are angels," he said, accepting a steaming cup. His fingers brushed Clara's as he took it, sending a familiar warmth through her that had nothing to do with the hot drink. Thursday morning, Clara arrived early to find Ethan already there, helping her cook set up for breakfast. He'd learned where everything was kept. How to work the industrial coffee maker, which regulars needed their coffee immediately upon sitting down. "You don't have to do this," Clara said, watching him slice tomatoes for the morning's omelets. "I know," he replied simply. "I want to." Throughout the day, Clara noticed how different everything felt. The diner hadn't changed, same worn booths, same slightly squeaky front door, same familiar faces, but something had shifted. The space felt warmer, more alive. Even her regular customers commented on it. "Place has got a special glow lately," Mrs. Peterson said as Clara refilled her tea. "Must be all that happiness floating around." By Friday, it felt as though Ethan had always been part of their routine. He arrived early again, this time bringing fresh pastries from the bakery across town. Emily worked on homework at her usual booth after school, occasionally calling out questions that Ethan would help her solve between answering emails. Clara moved through her familiar tasks, taking orders, cooking, chatting with customers, but now with a constant awareness of Ethan's presence. She found herself catching his eye across the room, sharing silent laughs over inside jokes, feeling steadied by his quiet support. As the last customer left and the sun began to set, Clara flipped the closed sign on the door. Emily was setting 3 places at their favorite booth, while Ethan helped Clara carry dishes from the kitchen. "I made something special," Clara said, bringing out a steaming casserole. "My mom's recipe." They settled into the booth, passing dishes, sharing stories about their week. Emily dominated the conversation, jumping between topics: her upcoming book report, the playground's new swings, a funny thing her friend said at lunch. Clara watched them both, Emily's animated gestures, Ethan's attentive nods, and felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't the giddy excitement of new beginnings anymore, but something deeper, a sense of rightness, of pieces fitting together exactly as they should. The diner's old clock ticked steadily on the wall. Outside, streetlights flickered on, one by one. Inside, their little booth felt like its own world, warm and safe and complete. Emily was explaining her latest science project idea, complete with detailed hand motions. Ethan leaned forward, completely engaged, asking questions that made her eyes light up with enthusiasm. Clara found herself memorizing the moment, the way the diner's soft lighting caught Emily's hair, the sound of their mingled laughter, the comfortable weight of belonging that filled the room. "More casserole?" Clara offered, already knowing Ethan would say yes. He'd praised it 3 times already. "Always," he smiled, holding out his plate. "I might need this recipe." "Family secret," Clara teased, serving him another portion. "You'll just have to keep coming back." "I plan to," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with warm certainty. Emily yawned, leaning against her mother's shoulder. The clock showed just past 8, and the dinner dishes were long empty. Through the windows, stars had begun to appear in the darkening sky. This was what peace felt like, Clara realized. Not the absence of challenges or the guarantee of perfect days, but the steady knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of amber as crowds gathered around the renovated playground. What had once been a collection of rusty swings and worn-out slides now gleamed with fresh paint and new equipment. Colorful ribbons fluttered in the breeze, stretched across the entrance where a small podium had been set up. Clara smoothed down her simple blue dress, feeling both proud and slightly nervous as she watched the townspeople arrive. Emily bounced beside her in a flowery sundress, clutching a small bouquet of daisies she'd picked herself. "Look, Mom, Sarah from my class is here." Emily waved enthusiastically at a friend. "And there's Mrs. Johnson from the library and Mr. Peterson from the hardware store." Clara smiled, taking in the familiar faces. The whole town seemed to have turned out for the occasion. Old Mr. Wilson had brought his famous lemonade, setting up a stand near the benches. The high school band was warming up their instruments, their conductor adjusting sheet music on portable stands. Ethan appeared beside them, looking relaxed in khakis and a light blue button-down shirt. "Quite a turnout," he said softly, giving Clara's hand a gentle squeeze. "I still can't believe how different it looks," Clara replied, gazing at the playground. The old metal structure had been completely transformed. New safety padding covered the ground. Bright climbing walls invited adventure, and wheelchair-accessible ramps ensured every child could join in the fun. Mayor Thompson approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. What a wonderful day for Seabreeze." She beamed at the crowd. "I think we all remember how this playground looked just a few months ago. But thanks to our community's spirit and the generous support of Ethan Caldwell, we're about to unveil something truly special." The mayor continued with thanks to various community members who had helped with the renovation. Clara noticed how many of the faces in the crowd were familiar from those volunteer days, people who had shown up with paintbrushes and tools, bringing packed lunches and determination. "And now," Mayor Thompson said, "I'd like to invite Ethan Caldwell to say a few words." Emily gave Ethan's hand an encouraging squeeze as he walked to the podium. Clara felt a surge of pride watching him, not because of his wealth or status, but because of the genuine way he had become part of their community. "Thank you, Mayor Thompson," Ethan began, his voice warm and sincere. "But I have to disagree with one thing. I'm not the one who made this happen. This playground is the result of something much more powerful than any single person's contribution." He paused, looking out at the gathered faces. "It's about kindness. the kind of kindness that makes someone return a stranger's lost phone. Clara felt her cheeks warm as several people turned to smile at her. That simple act of kindness led me to discover what makes Seabreeze special, Ethan continued. It's not the ocean views or the charming streets, though those are wonderful. It's the people. People who show up for each other, who bring coffee to volunteers, who spend their weekends painting equipment instead of relaxing at home. Emily leaned against Clara's side, beaming with pride as Ethan spoke. This playground represents more than just a place for children to play, he said. It's a reminder that when we come together, when we choose kindness and community over isolation, amazing things happen. Every child who plays here will learn that lesson, that they're part of something bigger than themselves. Applause rippled through the crowd. Clara noticed several people wiping their eyes, touched by the sincerity of his words. So now, Ethan said, stepping back from the podium, I'd like to ask two very special people to help me cut this ribbon. He gestured to Clara and Emily. Because without them, none of this would have happened. Emily practically skipped to the podium, pulling Clara along. The mayor handed them a large pair of scissors, its blades reflecting the golden evening light. Standing there, with Emily's small hand wrapped around the scissors handle and Ethan's steady presence beside them, Clara felt a wave of contentment wash over her. This moment captured everything that had changed in their lives. The way their small family of two had expanded to include not just Ethan, but a stronger connection to their whole community. Ready? Ethan asked softly. Emily nodded enthusiastically. Ready. Together, they cut the ribbon. The band struck up a cheerful tune as the crowd cheered. Children who had been barely containing their excitement surged forward, racing toward the swings and slides. The setting sun cast long shadows across the new playground, but they were happy shadows, filled with the sounds of laughter and joy. Clara watched as Emily's friend Sarah called out to her, waving from the top of the climbing wall. Go ahead, Clara said, giving Emily a gentle push. Have fun. Emily hugged them both quickly before running off to join her friends. The playground quickly filled with children, testing every new feature, their parents watching from the new benches around the perimeter. As the sun began its final descent toward the horizon, the playground came alive with activity. Children lined up for the spiral slide, scrambled across monkey bars, and filled every swing. Their laughter mixed with the evening breeze, creating a symphony of happiness that echoed across the park. The new LED lights began to switch on automatically as dusk approached, bathing the playground in a warm, welcoming glow. Clara stood between Ethan and the mayor, watching Emily swing higher and higher, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight. The evening breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean as Clara, Ethan, and Emily made their way down the weathered planks of Seabreeze Pier. Their footsteps created a gentle rhythm against the wooden boards, matching the steady pulse of waves beneath them. Emily skipped between them, her small hand firmly clasped in each of theirs, creating a perfect chain of three. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pier, and the string lights that lined the railings had just begun to twinkle. Clara breathed in deeply, savoring the peaceful moment. The day's excitement from the playground opening still hummed through her body, but now it had settled into a warm contentment. Look at all the colors! Emily pointed at the sky with her free hand. The horizon was painted in brilliant strokes of orange and pink, reflecting off the calm water below. It's like someone spilled watercolors everywhere. Ethan chuckled, the sound rich and warm. That's quite the artistic description, Emily. You might have a future in poetry, as well as science. Maybe I'll be a scientist who writes poems about experiments, Emily declared, making both adults laugh. They reached their favorite spot, about halfway down the pier, where a wider section offered the best view of the coastline. Clara remembered countless evenings spent here with Emily, just the two of them, watching the sunset and dreaming about the future. Now, with Ethan's solid presence beside them, those dreams felt different, more tangible somehow. The playground turned out even better than I imagined, Ethan said, his voice thoughtful. Seeing all those kids racing around today, that's what community is all about. Clara squeezed his hand. You made a lot of families very happy today, though I noticed you didn't mention in your speech how you personally funded most of the repairs. That wasn't the important part. He shrugged, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The important part was how everyone came together to help build it. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about other projects we could tackle. Emily perked up. Like what? Can we build a rocket ship? Well, maybe not quite that ambitious, Ethan laughed, but I was thinking about the old community center. It could use some work, and imagine what we could do with that space. After-school programs, science clubs. A cooking class, Emily chimed in. Mom could teach everyone how to make her famous apple pie. Clara felt her cheeks warm. I don't know about famous. Are you kidding? Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. That pie you brought me changed my life. If I hadn't tasted it, I might never have realized what I was missing out on at that fancy hotel. They shared a look over Emily's head, both remembering how that simple gesture had helped bridge the gap between them during those early, uncertain days. Emily swung their joined hands back and forth. Can we go on trips too? I've never been on a real vacation. Well, Ethan pretended to consider carefully, though Clara could see the sparkle in his eyes. I happen to know this amazing little beach town about 2 hours up the coast. They have the best ice cream shop you've ever seen, and there's this lighthouse. Can we go? Please, Mom? Emily bounced on her toes, her enthusiasm infectious. Clara nodded, unable to keep from smiling. I suppose we could close the diner for a weekend sometime soon. Yes! Emily pumped her fist in the air, then immediately returned to holding their hands. And we can have picnics, and build sandcastles, and look for shells. And have quiet family dinners, Ethan added softly, meeting Clara's eyes again. Just the three of us. Clara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Just a few months ago, she had been so focused on protecting herself and Emily from hurt that she'd nearly missed out on this chance at happiness. One lost phone, one act of kindness, had changed everything. They reached the railing, and Emily let go of their hands to lean against it, watching a group of seagulls swoop and dive over the waves. Clara felt Ethan's arm slip around her waist, and she leaned into him slightly, allowing herself to fully embrace the comfort of his presence. The sun was just touching the horizon now, turning the sky into a canvas of deep gold. The water reflected the light like thousands of diamonds scattered across its surface. Clara thought about all the sunsets she'd watched from this spot, all the times she'd felt alone in her struggles. Now, standing here with Emily and Ethan, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the strange and wonderful way life had brought them together. Emily turned back to them, her face glowing in the golden light. Her eyes sparkled with that particular mix of mischief and innocence that only children can manage. So, she said, drawing out the word with a grin, coffee date again tomorrow? Clara and Ethan exchanged an amused look, both remembering that first awkward coffee meeting that had started it all. Emily had no idea how her innocent question at the cafe that day had set everything in motion. The moment hung in the air, filled with shared understanding and joy, as the sun continued its slow descent into the sea. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Clara Henderson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.